So, good afternoon, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yay. So we've got, similar to what you've used before, your planner, reflective log and progress monitor, for you guys to plot your own way through what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And again, using me as a resource, just as we do with part 2. So if you've got questions, that sort of, we can do that. But it's really just planning out what we do, how we do it. And it's a very similar one to the one you used before. How does it work for you? Just to collect your thoughts, really. But on here, the master progress monitor, this then on page 17 in the planner one.
Yeah.
So there's the things that we need to do if we ignore the bulk bit. That's that list on the right hand side. Core comms, identify the fault and analyze the fault, remedial action, level of instruction, planning, control, communication, question answer technique, feedback, encouragement, use of controls, attitude and approach. So we'll look through those in a short while and see what we think they're all about, what the test's all about, how the guy's going to assess you, and then what we think we need to do. So this will help you progress through. Do you understand it? Are you comfortable with it? Are you confident with it? Underneath that is the preset tests. 10 tests in 2 phases. First phase is a beginner or a partly trained people. We're going to teach him to do something he's never done before. The second stage, he's probably had the lesson already on the subject, and today is a brush-up. His last instructor can't make it. Got me tested in a couple of weeks. He said we were going to do a brush-up session on this. Over to you. So you're not necessarily going to teach him it from scratch, but he's going to have some things wrong with it that need fixing. So that's our job really, is to find the fault and fix the fault. And the reason that we got that, because this whole thing was set up, registered driving instructors, because the government of the day felt that the sort of instruction that was going on wasn't safe. We were not producing safe drivers. So that's what the whole thing's about. It's all set up to do that. So it's all naturally based around safety. Are you producing safe drivers? So is your instruction safe? Are you able to correct errors in their driving and or errors in their attitude and approach? And they may be labouring under misapprehensions that they picked up from elsewhere. Well, it's a good idea to do this. You need to challenge that and change that behaviour. So that's what it's all about really. And it's titled A Test of Your Instructional Ability. Now, obviously in previous sessions we've already had a chat about what client-centred's all about. So if we have a look at the criteria for the test, I'm refining this as I go along, and I'll gladly take some ideas from you themselves. But if you look at the name of the test, that's our clue. A test of our instructional ability. So we need to instruct. It's not a test of our coaching ability. It's not a test of our ability to plan lessons as such. It's to instruct. So coaching skills are not being assessed. So we need to give instruction. And our motto, if you look, I'll put it up, don't be a passenger in the car. You're not a passenger, you're an instructor. And this guy that's sat next to you is not a learner driver. He's an assessor who's been sent to assess your performance matched against a set of criteria. So if we understand that criteria, the thinking is, touch wood, we'll better match it. And we'll better be able to know if we are matching it or if we're not. And if we're not matching it, what might we do about it? And that's where the practice sessions that we're going to do come in. We'll investigate some of these things. What do we do when it does work? Well, you stop and go, well done, have a pat on the back, have a Malteser. If it's not working, right, what can I do to change this? So always remember, you're the one under assessment here, not him. So the reality is you've got to spot when he makes mistakes. So you've got to watch him, you've got to correct things that are wrong in his attitude or approach, you've got to listen to him. And the reality is, I think we were chatting about this the other day, does it matter where you sit the test? No. Because no matter what's happening out there, you could spend the whole of that test sat like that, staring, watch what's going on. If he gets it wrong, because you know the routine for things happening, don't you? In no position. You just watch him, there's one missing, you can check him out there before you signal. Tell me about that. Why is that a good idea? Oh, I've noticed you crossed your hands on the steering there. Oh yeah. What do you gain from that? What's the disadvantages? So we're straight into risk, because that's what it's all about. Risk management, creating safe drivers. So when we've used the term learner in this documentation, right through it, it's used to describe a learner in a passive mode. A learner who's probably not going to have any ideas of his own. He might have, but probably not. So we always just find out first. And who's not going to be offering you any help as an instructor, because he's there to assess you, not to help you along the way. And learner drivers, of course, will do their best to come up with answers to solutions and solutions to problems. This guy won't. So when you ask him, you know, have you put a seatbelt on before? No. My mum always does that for me. You know, have you adjusted a seat before? No, my dad doesn't let me touch and stuff in his car. So he's not going to give any help. So right, fair enough. I'll tell you how. So he's in a passive mode, and he can't work things out for himself unless you get really slick at anything. So okay, I'll drop that now. He'll work it out for himself and move on to the next thing he wants to assess. He's using it to test your knowledge of the subject and your skills as an instructor. So it's important that we demonstrate the knowledge and skills that we would use if the learner really didn't have any idea, like they'd just been beamed in from another planet. Your knowledge needs to be solid. Now, if we ever think about that, how solid do you think your knowledge of driving is? What do you reckon?
Well, I just passed the Part 2 test. They'll fulfil the criteria of practical side of it.
So you've got a pretty good handle on it, haven't you?
Yeah.
A couple of good drives.
Yeah, we've had good results on the Part 1.
So you know what you're about.
Yeah.
So you need to use that now. Let's put that into a practical sort of context. So you're just going to teach him to do what you do. And if he doesn't do what you do, that needs fixing. Because it's clearly not safe. Because you guys are safe. We do, of course, just as a watchword, need to keep our driving at that standard as much as we can. And keep the commentary driving going, because that can form the basis of your briefing. You just close your eyes and imagine you're driving it. Tell them what you would do. So it's you know, as though they'd landed from another planet. So the reality is, in the real world, we'll apply client-centered learning, where the learning comes out of the learner. That ain't going to happen here. You're going to have to put that learning in, because if you don't, it won't happen. Which is not like it is in the real world, but this isn't the real world. This is an assessment of your abilities.
So is there no point asking questions?
You could ask,
as well?
because he might, you know, if he thinks, oh, yeah, I'll leave the way you're going here.
That's a good
I want to
question.
move to the next bit. I'll start answering questions. He might. So it's always worthwhile asking.
I suppose it depends on the level of where you start at. Saying, well, what's your experience? Have you driven a car? What sort of scenario? If it's just across a field or whatever.
So a partly trained driver that's ready for the test, if that's the scenario he's going to give you, you would expect him to answer some of your questions.
Well, for example, to give you a scenario that might help you with that, if he says I'm going to do crossroads, he must have done approach and junctions to turn right and left, and T-junctions, or you're not doing crossroads. So we can perhaps, you know, I'm not going to say make assumptions, because that's a terrible thing to say, but you just say, so you've done T-junctions approach and an emerging, haven't you? Yeah, how do you get on with that? No, it's pretty good. Okay, so no troubles with the approaching and emerging. You know the difference between open and closed? Yeah, tell me what they are. Oh, well, open's where you can see roads, and what would you do there? Oh, well, I did that. Okay, so you can take it as ready, it's going to be okay.
In reality, he shouldn't say, I don't know,
No.
because hang on, you've just told me that you've done the left, right.
You don't know that.
Yeah.
So well, tell me what you did when you were approaching a T-junction. Oh, well, I did this. Oh, it's the same here. All right, oh, okay, I got you. So we've got to be listening, we've got to be on our toes all the time. You cannot afford to switch off for a second, because if you do, you'll find something to hit you with. So again, if we say it in the right way, it's an assessment. Let's lose any idea that it's to do with the real world, which is not. You've seen how that works. You've seen the videos with Danielle and how quickly she picks them. That's how it is in the real world. So the term PDI, when I've used it throughout here, so I mean on this one, we're definitely putting the learning in, instructing. PDI, well that's you. You're a potential driving instructor in the eyes of the DSA, and you'll become an ADI if you pass this test of your instructional ability. So the only way to get past them is to instruct. And correctly, of course. That's what's being tested. So, as I put it, in light of that, don't be a passenger. You're an instructor. Use the time to instruct. And to then assess for yourself, is my instruction working? And if it isn't, you need to do something. If the same fault keeps occurring over and over and over, you're not doing something right. In his eyes, you've not given it. You might come up with a really good reason why he shouldn't do what he's doing, but if he doesn't think that's relevant, so for example, if he's driving along at 23 miles an hour in a 40, you say, no, we need to be doing 40 here. Oh, no, I feel safer doing 23. But there's an argument there. But come on a bit quicker, so you go 23 and a half. No, a bit quicker than that, 24. A bit quick, 25. So we've got to get to the underlying problem. This is where the analysis comes in. Why are you travelling at that speed? Oh, watch that advert. drive safely. You know, speed kills. So he's got a relevant reason for doing it. Speed kills, I'm scared of that. But we've got to change that opinion. You can't just go, all right, and get him up to 27 miles an hour and leave it. He has to travel at 40 miles an hour. So we need to show him that travelling at the speed he's travelling at is not safe. Risk again. It's risky. Why is it risky? What do you think the consequences of that could be? I don't know. Is the car coming up behind, look how close he is. What do you think he's about to do? Well, he might overtake. Have we created that situation? Yeah, but he shouldn't. I know he shouldn't, but he might. And have we contributed to that? Well, I suppose we have. So we're actually making things unsafe by forcing him to go past. So I think in light, I don't think it should be a bit quicker. Come on, up to 40. Come on, go. Now, go on, more, go. Right, now see what's happening behind us. Oh, right. So he's not thinking of overtaking him. So you actually kept the situation safe. Oh, I see what you mean. So now we've hit on the reason. But if he sat there thinking, that's his reason, I'm scared of going fast, and you're saying, we need to do this because it's the law, he's not going to respond to it. So sometimes we've got to kind of second guess what his idea might be. And the only way to do that, ask him, why do you think it's safe to do this speed? Well, so get it justified. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Any questions on that? Does that seem to fit with what you thought it might be?
No, it just opens up potentially a massive conversation just by, say, a simple observation of a speed, and there's a whole list of consequences potentially as a result of going slower, where on the face of it you think, well, that's not going to cause a problem, that is it?
Well, of course, if you think about it, this guy's using this to assess you. He's doing it for a particular reason. He has a reason for doing it. So if you're talking to him about something else that it might be, you're like, no, it's not that. So we sometimes have to, like, guess why he's doing it. But I think if we just find out from him.
I guess that listening to his sort of preamble prior to the examination
Might give you a hint.
picking up little bits, it might give you a hint. So, for instance, the crossroads bit, we should know really at our stage now that you would have covered, left and right turns and T-junctions.
So that's something else that's a useful one, Kev. It's a great one. So you need to be aware of the order in which things should be done.
Yeah.
So, for example, you would never do crossroads before you did turning right and left off a main road.
But the book does give you opportunities to mix.
It does.
So,
But that might be adapted for where you live.
Right. Okay.
But that's again real world scenario. This
Yeah.
guy's going to say, I'm doing this. Doesn't matter if you're not in a good area doing it. That's what you're doing because he chooses, not you.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a real live learner choosing in an area you knew, he may say, in light of where we live, to be fair, we should probably do roundabouts first because we're going to hit them before we're going to hit this.
So it's surrounded by roundabouts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keys.
Yeah.
So the next bit then, core competencies. Now, I think it's almost self-explanatory, isn't it? That's the core of who we are as an instructor. So this has to be right, because if this is not right, nothing else matters. So it's the core of what we do. This is what's being assessed. Can you spot the fault? Can you analyse the fault? And can you provide remedial action? Can you correct it? And then perhaps even get out a bit at the bottom, prevent it happening again, which might be a reminder or whatever it happens. So if we have a look at it, I mean, there's some explanations in your exam guide as to what these are about and how they actually mark each thing. So it'll give you what denotes a 1, what denotes a 3, what denotes a 6. It's useful then to have a look at what the difference between the 3 and the 6 is. You need to be in that bit there, because anywhere in between those two is a pass. Or if you hit anything that's on the 3, we'll look at those in a bit. So fault identified, because that's your ability to clearly identify anything that's important, and to prioritise them. For example, if he's driving too close to the car in front, and sometimes he's 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, which one are we going to focus on, we think? Because that's the most dangerous. So we deal with them in order of risk, order of
So
priority.
important is danger.
Yeah, always the same thing. Think about it always in terms of risk. And I think it'll help us, and I've noted that at the bottom, if you look at the note beneath those 3, it might be helpful to think of it in terms of risk rather than fault, because fault, you can just blame somebody and then we're done.
Yeah.
Risk, we need to reduce risk at That's our job. A good instructor reduces risk. A good coach helps the learner to identify the risk of themselves and reduce it. That's the difference. We have to do all the work here.
Yeah.
So if you think of it in terms of risk reduction and meet that criteria, because that's why the register was created in the first place. If you're meeting that criteria to ensure the instructor's instruction and methodology was safe, then you've got the job sorted. So this is what they see it all about. Managing risk is about identifying the fault, analysing the fault, and fixing the fault. Now, if you can get the learner to do some of that, great. It's a little bit harder on part 3 because he's not going to be as compliant. He's not going to tell you, well, I'm doing that because of, unless you find that out. So we need to spot the fault first of all. So how are we going to do that? It seems like a crazy question, but what's in our mind about how we might do that?
By watching.
How much of the time do we watch him? How much of the time, or her, how much of the time do we watch outside the car, do you reckon?
I think you've got to spread it pretty evenly because you need to
It's not
identify.
50-50, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
you need,
How would that differ if it was a learner driver?
70-30, I think. You need to concentrate on what's to
Which way around? 70 outside, 70 outside?
outside.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, we're going to have to be in a position where it's a bit like with the commentary drive. You're going to be looking way further ahead than the student. So we've got time to think, well, if I was doing this is the plan, right, is this how you're setting yourself up? Or at that point you might be saying, right, you need to start preparing for this junction coming up, this is what you need to be doing. But you've already seen, with maybe 2 cars already stood at the junction, whatever it might be, pedestrians about to step off.
And also if there's a requirement for you to take control, you need to be aware of what's happening outside.
So if you ever think about this, for a learner driver, it's interesting what you said about and this is just thinking out loud, Tanya, what you said about the learner driver, you need to look a long way ahead because you've already got a plan in your mind about where you're going. On exam, he will say to you, tell me to take the next turn on the right. So that's as much notice as you get. So when we start looking, it's different, I think. And how we look as well. So it's maybe worthwhile just investigating a little bit. What we see is the difference between learner drivers and this guy or this woman. Every time I say guy, I mean woman as well. This examiner. So at what point do you start watching him?
So on the actual test then,
He'll say,
are you not in the
road,
position,
no.
yeah, you're still giving instruction to him?
He'll tell you what to tell him. Tell me at the end of the road, tell me
Right.
to turn right.
Okay,
At the roundabout, tell me to take the third
so
exit.
it's totally reverse, he's already sussed out, right, I'm going to pick this
He
road
knows
up.
where he's going. He also knows what fault he's going to commit. That's preordained.
Right,
He'll
okay.
know what he's going to do. So this is different to a learner. With a learner, we need to be aware of the situation outside to a much higher level than we do with this guy. Why do you think that is? What do you reckon?
Because you're concentrating on his driver errors, which is what you're being assessed on. I mean, the guy's a competent driver anyway, and I don't think for a minute he would put you in an unsafe position.
Correct.
But you need to see what he's doing.
At the same token, you've got to be careful he doesn't lead you down a blind alley in as much as, right, tell me to take the next turning on the road, and he already knows there's no right turn.
He wouldn't do that.
He won't.
No.
Right.
They won't do anything to deliberately trick you or trip you up. They'll play with a straight bat.
Okay.
It sometimes comes across that it isn't that way, but those stories are started by people who haven't passed the test. That's right, that's right. So, well, it just wasn't fair. He was being an idiot. No, he made some mistakes that you didn't spot. Analyse and fix. It's as simple as that.
So there's a huge difference with regards to what you would expect to do with a real learner.
Yeah.
And this guy, even though he says he's a big total beginner.
But we keep a very close eye on learner drivers because they might kill you.
Yeah.
So we need to be aware about what's coming up. How likely is this guy to kill you?
He's not going to kill you.
So how much time do you need to spend looking outside? In line with that, do you think?
But you need to be aware of what's going on outside
Do you need to
because
be aware?
there still might be a requirement to take control of the car, as with Darren, on his reverse part manoeuvre, he had to apply the brakes for him.
Yeah.
And was that part of the assessment?
Oh
or
yeah,
it was
He
right.
was going too quick and you need to do something about it.
Right.
Now, he could have done the same thing by just letting them zoom back and hit the curb and go around the curb.
Yeah.
It's not so much of a big deal. I I mean, it is. It's better if you can prevent it, but if he just gets it and then fixes it afterwards,
Yeah.
spot it, analyse it, fix it, all that matters.
Yeah.
How you get there doesn't really matter. But if you've done that, if he stops making those faults, you've done your job.
Yeah. But understanding that, you know, he's there to assess your ability to spot the problems that he's going to incur and use as part of the exam. So yeah, you're right. I mean, you need to be aware of what's going on outside, you know, in a quick glimpse, but
So does
if
that
he's-
reduce to sort of 10% looking outside?
Possibly. Just to investigate what you think here. It's,
So at the point where he gives you instruction using that example, right, we're going to take the next turn to the right, is he then looking at you to say, well, is he doing a check front and back before he tells me he's going to be
obviously
alright?
is. They'll do things that sometimes appear to be unsafe, like he'll not check his mirrors before he does stuff, but he will have already checked very thoroughly with his right hand door and had a proper look to make sure it's safe to do what he's about to do, because I'm not allowed to put anybody at risk.
But what I'm getting at, if you were in that scenario with a learner and you say, right, take the next turn to the right, we would have already checked it's safe ourselves before we tell them.
Correct.
So when he says, I want to turn right, is he then looking at us to say,
Are you watching me? Yeah.
I've done a check, right, I'd like to take the next turn to the right.
And if you're not watching him, he's going to play havoc with you. He's going to dance you around on the end of a straight. Classic one, manoeuvre, doing a reverse to the left. Examiner sat there, looking backwards. Candidate on test looks to the left, examiner looks around thoroughly while this guy's looking this way. Look back, and then the candidate says, "Come on, you need to check all around." I did. No, you didn't. Did. Didn't. Did. You didn't. I did. I did. My last instructor, you know, I used to watch me all the time. He was good. I liked him. It's better than you. Now look where we are.
Well, funnily enough, I noticed that when we were on test, examining, he was sort of sat this
Oh,
way,
he was.
watching. So,
Oh,
he was
yeah.
totally trusting us and what we were doing, wasn't it? So,
He knows you're not going to. He's aware of the reputation of LDC beforehand, and he knows who we are. When you spotted that in the conversation we had afterwards, so he knows we're not going to put nuggets in for a test, and he'll be able to tell. How long do you need to be sat next to somebody before you know whether they're a good driver or not? Seconds, isn't it? Really? Before you realise you feel confident.
So you just first half a mile, I think.
You know, if you're going to hit stuff, he knows he's got to break then. He'd be pretty sick when he'd stop you doing it. So once he speaks to us in the passenger seat, he's going to get something wrong. Just assume that. He's giving you a direction to give back to him. Something's going to happen. So watch him, and watch him like a hawk. So he says to you, take the next road on the right. Have a look at what's about, and then start watching him. By all means, have a quick glance at what's going on there. Don't take your eyes off him. You take your eyes off him, you'll miss it, whatever it is. As I said, I think you can almost, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can almost just sit and stare at them all the time. And the faults will become apparent, because you'll feel, ooh, we were a bit quick there. What happened there? I don't know. The car felt a bit rough. What sort of speed were we going around that corner? Did it feel right to you? Yeah. It didn't feel right to me. Let's have a little look at that. So we can deal with, once we've spotted the fault. So, sorry, I don't want to push on too quickly.
Fine, no.
Does that make sense? That we need to be spending time looking at them? And again, not thinking of them as a learner driver, but this guy's going to put a fault in that's set to test you. Have you spotted it? Are you going to analyse it, and then are you going to fix it? And again, on the form, there's a little list of things that we probably get on, and I tend to keep them within subject. They're pretty good that way. I sat in on a test recently, and there was dozens of things that the examiner could have used because they just became there. And if I'd been out on training, I would have used them. And he let them slip because they're not part of the subject. That's a fair crack of it, then. So he did stick with the subject. So he should make faults in that area. So if we keep our eye on him, we should spot him. We'll get more practice like when we're out in the car. But it's seeing the difference here. He's not a learner driver. He is a very competent driver who's going to deliberately get something wrong for a particular reason.
But these are blatant faults. They're not subtle.
They tend not to be subtle. No, they tend to be pretty. You know, it's coasting people. So you can't tell when people are coasting. Coasting has a feel. You can see this as we get into it. There's a particular feel to things. But the reality is, you know, we sometimes have to correct things that they say. So you can listen carefully because he might tell you the wrong things. But the reality is, you only see what you're looking for, and you only hear what you're listening for. So if you're not properly looking, you're not properly listening, you're going to miss it.
presumably as well, if he's coasting, you're going to see the pedals going down.
You should do, if you're watching. But if you're not, So it's hard to see the pedals. Well, all right then.
The rest
How
of
does
your
costing
foot.
feel like? So,
So
if you
do they
can't-
engage in conversation whilst
Possibly.
they're going around?
So here, there's one for you. Let's use the coasting thing. So you think he's coasted and you're not sure because you can't see. What can you do about that? So we think we've spotted a fault, we're not sure. What can you do?
The rev counter.
Possibly.
That's
That's
it. Ask him.
Where's the clutch? That clutch down there? Oh yeah. Oh, my last study, so do you know what that's called? Oh, it's coasting it. Let's just probably have a little chat about that. So that's another one. When you've identified the fault, do you deal with it on the move? Do you deal with it stopped? What's your thoughts on that?
I think if it could develop into a dangerous fault, like coasting could do, and you lose control of the car, then that needs to be stopped and discussed and it needs to be made aware.
Depends on how high the risk is, doesn't it?
It depends on the risk.
So
Yeah.
if the risk is high, stop. Because he can't get it wrong with the car stood still. It's impossible to put a fault in, really, a driving fault in, with the car stood still. And then discuss it until until you're happy that you've got it right. And they can sometimes use the rule. You tell them you want to stop, and you haven't finished discussing it, and you're trying to drive off. Just put the brake on. More of that in a bit. So we've spotted the fault, whatever it happens to be. We've now got to analyse that fault. It isn't enough that we've spotted it, and you can spot it and then just keep telling him not to do it again, but you haven't changed the way he thinks about it. He's still going to do that fault without your intervention. So that's where the analysis phase comes in. So if we look here, it covers your ability, having identified the fault, to effectively communicate the risk to the learner or the examiner, along with the degree or the level of importance. If the learner doesn't see the importance or the relevance of this analysis, the same fault will just keep happening. So if the same fault's happening over and over and over, what does that tell us to do?
Yeah, analysed it properly.
We haven't done our job. We have not instructed. Learning has not taken place. And not in the client-centred way. Learning hasn't happened because you haven't made it happen. So don't let that go unchecked. It's out there thinking, why is this happening again? Pull them on. All right, we're still doing this, is still happening. We need to have another little look at this. So we don't have to be clever about it and try and get him to do it, or to try and get him to analyse it. Right, this is still happening. Pull over. This is still happening. We need to have another little look at this. So remember we chatted about this before. So you've not hit on the reason. He's thinking this was something else. So it's just because you've given him what you think is a fantastic reason for not doing it doesn't mean he's going to accept it. So we need to analyse it. And we need to try and involve him. And you should find, because you'll have some experience, that he should be able to partake in a bit of a discussion at this point about what that's about. And this is where the DVSA will be happy to accept a level of client-centred learning.
So find out why he thinks it's okay to do what he's doing.
Yeah. So how might we do that? What would be a good way of, if he's just committed a fault, whatever it happens to be, how would we go about that then? So we spotted it, we're happy with that. Yeah, that's that box tick, we've pulled over, or we're doing it on the move, whichever it happens to be. So how are we gonna start that conversation? Do you know? Ideas?
I don't know, some along the lines of I've noticed you tend to do whatever the fault is. Talked about it earlier, you've maybe done it twice in the last couple of junctions. Do you understand consequences, or do you understand you're actually doing it?
Consequences is a great one, isn't it? Because you're forced to evaluate the riskiness of it. What could be the consequences of that? Oh, I don't know. Well, what if a kiddie had run out there at the speed we were travelling? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. So what would happen then? Oh, I suppose I might get a bit closer. And if you hit them, what would happen then? How would you feel then? Oh, I don't think I feel very good. Do you want that? Oh, no. So if we came in a bit slower, oh, right, I suppose there wouldn't be the risk there. So now they've engaged in that. We've analysed it effectively. We've seen that there are consequences to our actions. So we could say, well, what are the consequences? What if this happened? Or, well, what if this happened then? Yeah, but it didn't. Yeah, but what if it did? Like cutting the corner, say, for example. Now, I noticed you cut the corner there. Yeah, I don't want anybody about. What if there had been? Yeah, but there wasn't. Yeah, I take that. And the situation there wasn't anybody there. But what if your observation wasn't very good today because you were full of cold? What if somebody was speeding the other way? What if there was somebody just slightly hidden? What if there was a driveway hidden and somebody came, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So if that happened, what would be the consequences? And if we came around on the correct side of the road, what difference would that make? Well, I suppose that'd be a good one. So that's effective analysis. He has come round to our way of thinking, and or we have discovered the reason that he's doing it. Either way, we should then be able to affect a fix. So we've analysed it, so we now know what we should be doing. Does that mean that we're going to put it right? Do you think? If you're the examiner, you're assessing your performance, are you going to go, oh, well, that was great analysis, I'll fix it now?
You'd say, let's try again.
He might fix it, he might not.
And if he doesn't, then there's something you've missed.
But, yeah, but you could always, of course, just give them a reminder. I know you've just talked about it 11 seconds ago, but just say, okay, you'll say, tell me to the next turning on the right, to the next turning on the right. Remember what we just talked about position. So let's make sure we get that right here. All right, right. And even then, I mean, you should get it right, but you might not next time, so you might have to talk him through it. You might have to take control and give total instruction. Right, don't steer yet, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. Now steer. How was that? All right, oh, I see what you mean now. That's easier. So you've got to do what you've got to do.
So you do have some control then. So if you've stopped and you've analysed a fault, and then you want to go on just to recap and to confirm that you fixed the fault, you do have the option to say, right, I'd like you to go down the road and take the next right, just so we can
You can ask.
You can ask.
He may come back to you and go, I'll dictate it. You'll get an opportunity to do that later.
Right. Okay.
So you can't get have any level of control there, unfortunately. Some examiners will go, yeah, all right, I'll give you a go at that.
That's kind of pulling the rug a little bit from under your feet, isn't it?
Little bit.
Because you want to just carry on with the last part of the lesson as such.
Yeah. But again, if you look at it from the assessor's point of view, that's perhaps making things a bit too easy for you, and it doesn't really help him to assess the full range of skills that you've got. If you're saying, okay, well, let's just do this little loop here, because that's a fairly easy one, or I'm on comfy ground here.
Yeah.
No, let's keep you uncomfortable, let's just see what you're made of, let's test your instructional ability. In the cauldron of not knowing what the hell's coming next. And it's, you know, people say, well, it's not very fair, it's not like the real world. No, it's not. It's not at all. It's an assessment of your level, your skills. In some ways, it's easier, because they're not a learner driver, they're not going to try and kill you, they're not going to do stupid, like really outlandish things, well, too many outlandish things. So we've got to just see it for what it is, an assessment of your skills. So remedial action, we need to make sure before the car moves that there's a plan in place. That might be you reminding him. So I'll chat, do you want me to remind you next time? Do you think you remember that on your own? Just ask the question. Oh, I think I remember on my own.
Is that quite a sentence?
Little bit. So we've followed on from that, and then you can just watch what happens. And you'll get a good feeling for whether he's going to get it right or not. You'll start to sniff out these mistakes, because they're manufactured. They're not like, a learner driver can sometimes surprise you by the random things they do. You don't always see it coming. This guy, you probably see it coming. There'll be something telling you, that that's not the way you would drive, so on your toes straight away. A bit quick here. Tell me about your position on the road here. What made you choose this position here? Right, sorry, very comfy. I think we're a bit far out here. No, I think we are. Let's pull over and have a chat about that. Why do you think? I think you're too far out. Well, I don't know. Funny, that'll be an instructor. So you say, well, the reason I'm saying you're too far out is because of. Can you see how that makes sense? All right, so whatever it takes, and dance around. Just think, all right, I'm not getting the way I need to be. I'm going to make it happen. If we get those three right, the next one, instructional ability. It says the level of instruction must be matched to the ability and experience of the learner. Now you need to establish their level at the start and continue to do so throughout the examination. So we must never assume. We must be live and on the ball all the time. What's happening here? What do I need to do? What's he saying this for? Why is he doing that? Why is this happening? Why is that fault happening again? Why has that beautiful conversation we had not taken root? So the mark on this instructional ability will reflect the marks given in the core comps. It will be the same as the lowest mark you get in any of the three core comp boxes. So if you get 2 6s and a 4, that mark, the instructional ability will be a 4. It will always reflect it. I've not seen one that doesn't, and I'm told that that's how they're meant to mark it. I get the odd one occasionally, but I'm not seeing one. Further down you might see different marks, but level of instruction will nearly always match those top ones. So that's on the front page, that's the nuts and bolts of it, that's our bread and butter, that's what we need to do. Does that make sense? Does that help you to see what we need to be doing?
Well, yeah, much clearer understanding of what's going to come in the test, rather than
In the real world, yes.
as if you're dealing with a proper learner, if you like.
Yeah. Well, a learner will interact with you, and the dynamic will change with a learner as they learn new stuff about it. For example, if they're driving too slow because they feel safe, when you've had the conversation about how that might, not really be a good idea, their behaviour will probably change. An examiner won't if you've not hit on the reason that he's doing it. So some question is needed there. But again, if we just keep our eyes on the fact that he's doing this for a particular reason, my job is to find out what that reason is. If you haven't found it yet, you're not going to beat yourself up and think, oh God, you're just going to do something different. So if what you're doing is not working, do something different. Because you'd be crazy, wouldn't you? Just keep on doing the same stuff and expect a different result. That's madness, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I was going to say, it's like drinking poison and expecting somebody else to die. So that's basically, that's it. If we get that right, everything else is a piece of cake. And you can make huge mistakes in the other areas. Because if you get that right, the rest of it just falls into place. Because if you look at them, what it's about, planning, control, it's about, they tend to lump them together, they tend to be marked the same. Having assessed what the faults and the risks are and prioritise them, we should then, it says objectives should be defined and explained to the learner. We need to put a plan together, right? What are we going to do about that? Matched to them. So it also covers the sequence of events that we've planned and the ones that actually take place, together with the appropriateness and effectiveness of your tuition, the teaching methods you've used. Has it cured the fault? And if it has, well, it must be right. We must have planned that to happen. If the same fault keeps happening, that denotes that we've not planned. We haven't got control over what's happening. Things are just random, and we aren't playing a part in the sequence of events. We're not taking control of that. Or control is maybe not the right way to describe it, but we have not put in place things to fix whatever it is, and we're just randomly driven. We've become a passenger, a victim of circumstance. Where if it's not really going right for you, the first thing to do in all cases, what do you reckon that is? First port of call. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if things are not working the way you want, what are we going to do?
Pull over.
Stop the car. It's just right, let's pull over here. And sometimes it's to give you a bit of clear blue thinking time. Sometimes it's just to go, shut up a second. Let me think. Right, okay. Right, that last juncture. And just to give you some space. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what you do in any other walk of life. So if that's what you need to do it. Worry about it later. All right, so you might, look a little bit later that, some of the other stuff wasn't as good as it could have been, but
Yeah.
as long as you're getting where you need to be, or getting him where he needs to be. As we go down here, in my mind, these become less and less important. Communications is concerned with your understanding of instruction, the techniques that you apply, the appropriateness of language, to not use jargon, to make sure that you're understood all the time, and possibly more importantly, that you understand them. Okay, what's going on here? Let me just see if I can find out what's happening here. Tell me a bit more about that. Tell me about the position you took there. Is this working for you? Those sort of questions. Now, you're not going to get the same responses you would do from a real live learner, because they're going to open up and tell you, this guy's going to just give you the bare minimum. Because he doesn't want to be seen to be giving you a leg up. It's an assessment. He's not there to help you. And he's not there to encourage you and bring you on like a trainer would be. All right, can you do it or can you not? I'm not going to help you. I'm just going to see what you do with it. However, having said that, if he feels that you're nearly there, I was going to say he'll give you a hint, and not hints, they're blatant. He'll tell you what you need to do, and you wouldn't believe the amount of times that people miss it. I've heard them say stuff like, the mirror work's a bit iffy, and the PDI at the side that's done a good job up to now, but he's not picking up the fact that he's not checking his mirrors. How's my mirror work? He said, what? Well, I think it's all right. He said, well, I'm only asking because my last instructor used to get on me all the time about that.
Ding, the light bulb.
But we don't listen. We're not hearing what's being said. So if he said something to you, he's not passing the time of day. It's for a reason. So you think, why has he said that? Have a think about it. And even throw it back. I don't know why you ask. And just find out, because it's for a reason. And if you're being that interactive with him, and you're thinking and you're dancing your way around and following his, the path that he's leading you along, you should do all right. So it's, if you use over technical language, you go, I don't know what you mean. he might use language, you don't know what he means. For example, he might come up with something unusual, like, I don't know, one that's come up recently, the examiner was asked, now, how did you decide when to turn the steering to go into that side road? You know, I don't know, just take a snapshot. That's not what I've heard before. Snapshot. But it's very easy to let that ride. You just say, I'm not sure you understand what you mean there. Just describe what you mean by that. Tell me how that works for you. Another one that came up recently was, oh, just nibble at the clutch. It's another one. Nibble at the clutch. Just tell me what you mean by that. I've not heard that phrase before. Just hold your hands up. I've not heard that before. It's a new one on me. Tell me about that. What do you mean? What does nibbling at the clutch mean to you? All right, oh, I see. Oh, so you mean like it's just fine tuning the clutch control. All right, okay. And does that work for you? Yeah. Okay, then try it then. Let's see how that works. All right, brilliant. Well done. Or, well, actually, that's not working, is it? So let's try something else. Might I suggest? So if they've used terminology or a phrase that you're not familiar with, ask. Make sure you're in control, that you know what's going on, and there's no ambiguity in it. Well, what the hell do you mean by that? Because it's easy to drift on and go, what do you mean by that? Nibble at the clutch, I've not heard that before. Why are you messing around with that? He's Mr. Mirror Check. You know, then you check your mirrors there? Yeah. And he hasn't. So it's, does that make sense?
Yep.
It's also very important if the terminology they've used affects the matter at hand, the faults that we're dealing with. And it's like, what do you mean by that? Clear that up. Don't let it move on without you clear that up. You need to have a clear understanding of what's happening and what's about to happen. Otherwise you're not in control.
KISS.
Yeah. Glasgow one.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. Question and answer technique. Now, it says in their guidance at appropriate points during the lesson, the PDI should ask questions that contribute towards realising the objectives of the session or the particular risk identified. Well, find out what the hell's going on. Why is this happening? What's going on in the head of this person? What is the reason this person's come up with for doing what they're doing? And once you know that, make an effective fix, can't you? Because they're either right or they're not.
That goes back to the analysis bit, doesn't it?
It does. If
Well,
you've
you
got
can
that right.
go through potential consequences and whatever. Yeah.
So at all times, you're just clarifying what the situation is. But also,
So would that be sort of the prompts, a right turn or a left turn sort of thing? Okay, I remember we talked about this half an hour ago. Another left turn, we know what we're doing.
so it's, you're also saying, like, now, our speed was a bit quick on the way in there. Why do you think that was? Well, I don't know. You might say, I don't know. Or you might say, well, if you came in a bit slower, what difference do you think that would make? Those sort of things. You're just being alert and live to what's going on around you. The question and answer is really just to help you get a handle on what the hell's going on and what you may be able to do about it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that they need to also, of course, be used as a challenge to them, to make them think, as well as a test of their memory. Do they know the subject here? So you can be relating things. But what did it say on your theory about that? Can you remember? I can't remember. It's a long time ago. So feedback is the one that's linked. So we're getting further down here. At least less important, I think. That relates. You're being marked there in relation to the question that they might ask you, or the feedback that you're giving them. So it's all about, it's, if you like, a performance review almost, by them or by you, either way. Or is the feedback two-way? Is everybody aware of what's going on and what their part is in it, and what's about to happen next? So it's also, and it's also sometimes, and it's one thing that people tend not to want to do. That's better. Well done. Yeah, that was great. Loved the mirror work that time. Fantastic speed on approach that time. Well done. So it's also about inspiring self-trust. So it can also be used, at the end of a little session when you've done stuff to do a final risk profile. Okay, here were the things that we were doing before. Here's how we're driving now. Let's have a little look at how that compares. Although quite often you'll not get the chance to do that at the end because you'll have run out of time. You'll just move on. It should also include a mention of what the learner might be able to do to encourage self-development, if that's possible. But again, and I might take that little sentence out actually because it doesn't really fit. So it's something we do on the fleet test because it's all about the risk profile. That feedback might be what they can do going forward. So it might be, okay, now you've got that master on your next lessons, you might do this or that, but I don't think that's necessarily as relevant. As long as you fix the fault, that's all that matters. Use of controls. It says it should only be used when necessary, and the learner should always be told why it's happened, when it's happened. So if you've used them, you must tell them, I was making the break there, and this is why I did it. And it can be used as an effective teaching aid, or a little conversation thing. So as long as we talk about, well, what can we learn from that? But you can also use the dual controls to demonstrate stuff like clutch control. You just set some gas for me, I'll show you what I'm on about here. See what I mean? Oh, right. Just see how slow I can make it go. Oh, right. And it's about reducing risk. If you've had to use the controls, the conversation then has to happen really about, well, okay, well, why do you think I did that? I don't know. Well, here's why. Or you can say, like, obviously I've come in with the jewels there, because I felt that we were a bit quick. How did you feel about that? So it's a conversation has to happen. What can we learn from that? Or what can you help them to learn from it? What can you teach them as a consequence of what's just gone on? Where again, in the real world, we just have a chat about it, and the learning comes out. It's not going to happen. You've got to put the learning in. So here's what we're going to learn from that. Now, all of that level of control, and that level of, you being in total command, isn't really good for building rapport, and it certainly isn't client-centered. However, it ticks the boxes. What we've done here is to try and pare this back to just, let's look at the boxes. And how are we going to make sure we've done that? And then the final one, attitude and approach. It's about an assessment of your characteristics concerned with the skills you've used, and the way you've used them, or you're relaxed, or you're supportive. It's not meant to sort of assess your personality. It's not a psychometric test or anything like that. But it's a measure of how effective you are at establishing the right environment for learning to happen. And some of that, in terms of what we're looking at here, is about how you maintain control. Whereas in the client-centered approach, it's all about having the learner buy into what you're doing, which is a slightly different thing. Also, we've got to be reasonably confident in our own abilities. Easy to say, not so easy to do, and capable of transmitting that confidence to the learner. And also, we need to be avoiding physical contact. So that's all part of our tutoring approach, unless it's happened in an emergency situation, in which case you've had a chat about it before. For example, if you had to put a 360-degree turn on the steering, you've got to make some kind of contact. You would then discuss it afterwards. But it all needs to be done in a patient and tactful manner. If I'm honest, I don't think it matters what you do then. Further up that form you get, the more important they are. So if you've done your job at the top, these are the things that fall into place. And even if you had a bit of a poor attitude, I don't think it matters that much. More than keeping them safe. Because it is all based on safety. That's why the whole thing was introduced. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So at each stage as we go through, these are quite wide as well, so we might mark down there that we understand it. We might come back next week and say I don't understand it as well as I did. That's what your reflective log's about as well. The only thing that matters is that by the time we get to the test, we're confident in all of those. If we're less than confident, we need to do something about that. We can then sit down and say, right, what can we do about that? Do we find you some part 2 candidates that are loose on? Do we encourage you to maybe see if you can know somebody who wants to learn to drive? Do we find you other people to practice with? Whatever it happens to be, we put you through mock tests, do we, whatever. I'm open to try and whatever, really, because I am keen that we still maintain the client-centered ethos that we started at the start of you guys in part 2, and that we give you control of the learning process and ownership of that. But we wanted to set the framework to begin with, just to say, well, that's where we need to be, so you have an understanding of what the end game is. How are we going to get to it? And then on these tests, if you want to just say, if you had it in your mind that, well, what I want to do a mock test next week, see what happens. That's fine. Or if you were going to say, well, I want to work on each of these things in sequence, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter. I think the key thing is now that we've had that conversation, you can go away and think, right, how can I do that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so.
And I have a copy of a thing which is for my stuff. I have a record of each of the stuff I'm going to make copies of what you've written, but I've also got stuff to, to help me to reflect. How did that work? How did that not? Again, we'll have the video stuff, so we can look at that. What I'm also hoping for secretly as well is that this really works, obviously, but that we might harvest some really useful video that might help further people coming along understand what it's all about. Any questions?
No.
It's very painless.
The only point I would make is that having extended it from 20 hours to 40 hours, and that in the past you produced competent driving instructors anyway in this method. I would hope that it shouldn't be too much of a challenge, to be honest.
Well, the thing that concerns me, and I'll be completely and utterly honest with you on this. We used to do this training in 20 hours, and we used to have good pass rates. We now do 40 hours. The pass rates stay more or less the same. Something's not right there. And of course, as all part of this process, I don't tell tales out of school yet, but I should tell you this. I've looked at that and thought, why is that? Why is that not changed? Have the DVSA changed? I've sat in on enough tests recently to lead me to believe that no, they haven't. So perhaps we have. I mean, I don't know. I've got no proof either way, but my gut feeling is that we've made this a bit too flowery now, this stuff, and that we've started adding things on that we think, well, that's a good idea, let's add that.
But it doesn't add value.
No, it helps you in the real world
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
But does that then clutter the thing up in your mind heading towards test? And which is what the whole of this exercise is about. Let's just strip all of that out. Let's just look at the very, very basic stuff and get you guys red hot at that. See what that brings us.
Well, within the original 20 hours, where you're getting the good results, there was nothing within that was sort of client-centred, was there?
No, not a shred.
So,
Not a shred of it.
if you like, the additional 40 hour, the additional 20 for us will be once we've made target one, which is to pass this. For the other 20 hours, presumably, that's the point where we can embellish that and say, right, this is how we really nail it for client-centred, and build on those skills. You could argue it's the same as doing your normal driving test and say, right, I'm prepared to do an advanced test.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. That's actually a great analogy. Actually. Yeah. I'll steal that and use it as my own.
Another one.
Yes.
But it's in preparation, isn't it, for next year when they do switch to client-centred?
Well, it's if and when they do, it'll be very different. We'll not bother with this stuff here.
But in the meantime, you've still got people that want to be driving instructors until they change it.
I mean, obviously, you guys have been at some of the workshops that I've done.
Yeah.
You've seen what we're doing on the client centre and things.
Yeah.
And it's changing the world as far as driving instructors are concerned. But we'll add that stuff in later. You've already got a knowledge of how it works anyway, and you've had it applied to you. But what we're doing is we're stripping that away, and we're just thinking, right, just the basics. Simply the facts, ma'am. It's not going to drag that out, was it? Simply the facts. Let's just look at that. That's what it's about. Let's get good at those few. Let's get really good at those few things, rather than pretty good at everything. Let's get really good at those. However long that takes.
I think, I don't know what you think on this, but having done some of the reflective work with what we've done just on the part two,
Yeah.
if you sort of have that in your mind to start with, when you've identified a fault, where if you were sitting there saying, right, talk me through that, right, let's talk about this, and this is what I've noticed.
Yeah. Because he's not going to do that. He's not going to play a ball the way real human beings do.
So,
Like you have.
so it's almost like role reversal, where right, I'm now in the driving seat, I made that mistake, what do I expect to say as a response? Right, let's talk about it.
We're working out what the guy needs. What's he after here? What's this about? How am I going to get him to mark me high in these boxes here? Well, I need to identify it. So if I'm not identifying it, how would you know that? Because if you weren't seeing it, you wouldn't know. Because something isn't right. The car is not behaving the way it behaves when you're behind the wheel. So something's causing that.
I mean, as a rule, do they tend to be the same sort of thing, that he's not going to position correctly to junction,
Well,
going to cut a corner?
That's a great question, Ali, and let's have a little look at one of the test forms and analyse that. So if you look in your Part 3 exam guide,
21 again.
just let me get tell you what we got. It's on the
Isn't
right
it?
book.
Page 34.
Thank you, 34.
Yeah.
That's that there, which is PST 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, there's the stuff we've just talked about on the right. So that's the same on every form, all 10. The way the test works is he has them in a pile, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10. He just takes the next one off the top. So you'll get the next one on the pile when you go for your test. So these are always the same. He'll ask you to declare that the vehicle you've provided for the test is insured under Road Traffic Act, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to, you do or do not have to wear seatbelts. He'll have this stuff filled in, candidate name and stuff. He'll ask you to sign and date it. Or he's probably already dated it. You'll see below that in column A, so column B remains the same on every test one. Column A is PSD number 1, exercises 1B and 10T, so it's beginner controls. Beneath that is trained crossroads. So for the phase 1, the first 25 minutes to half an hour is controls. The next bit will be crossroads every time. So when you're signing the form, just have a look at the form and see what you're going to get. So here we have a list of things that we need to cover. Doors, seat head restraint, seat belt, mirrors, accelerator, foot brake, clutch, handbrake, gear, steering indicator, starting. Then there's a line there. If time permits, he might get down and move off and stop.
Right.
The reality is you probably shouldn't. And you'll know if you're going to get to that because you'll say, oh yeah, I know about these, that's accelerator, brake, clutch. He wants to get down and move off and stop. Other than that, you need to cover all of this. So you'll see we've got not covered, unsatisfactory or satisfactory. Satisfactory means you've covered it all in enough detail that he understands it. Unsatisfactory is sort of not really in enough detail. Not covered means not covered it. So we mustn't rush through these. Now, if you're just giving them a one-way lecture, which is what this is, what about our fault analysis and remedial action? And our fault identification? You've got to watch him for doing things wrong, but your analysis is really about, this is what we're doing, this is how we adjust it, this is why we do it that way. And then let him have a go, see if he does it right. So we've still got our core comps there, but we've added in some explanation. So that's our phase 1. Now, on the next one, PSD2, we'll not look at phase 2 just yet.
So on that then,
Yeah,
if you don't get past that, you literally don't turn the wheel.
no, you might only get that far, because he's engaged you in some question, which is fine. PSD2, we've got, this is how the next subjects are all there, a briefing on moving off and stopping at the top. So the briefing takes up the whole thing,
Yeah.
PSD1. PSD2 and all the others, you've got a box for briefing. Was it not covered? Was it unsatisfactory? Was it satisfactory? And then beneath that are the things that could go wrong, the mistakes he'll make, generally, on that. Now, if he hasn't made mistakes, I'm going to put a line through it. If he has made mistakes, then he needs to decide whether you've not covered the mistake he's made by not spotting it, whether you've done it in an unsatisfactory manner, or whether you've covered it satisfactorily. Now, you can have some unsatisfactory stuff in there and still pass, because you've dealt with the main things. Now, again, as we go on, the rest of them all follow the same pattern. There's a box that says briefing on, whatever the subject is, and then there's the things that can get wrong beneath it. So you've got an idea about where the mistakes are going to be. You're not going to randomly pick something else
Yeah.
out of the year. The boxes below were now either partly trained or full license holder. He has already had a brief, so it's just the mistakes he's going to make. You might want to question him beforehand. You might think you can get cute with your question and pin him in a corner and stop making mistakes. No, you can't. You know, you'd say my last instructor said, oh, we ought to do some work on crossroads today. All right. So what was he going to work on? I don't know. I forgot. Can think about it. Can you remember? No. So okay. So do you feel confident about crossroads? Do you know the approach and the yeah. What routine would you use? Why am I saying? You might just take a couple of minutes, just have a quick question and answer. Make sure you've got an idea about what it's about, and then get on the move. And it's the same with the briefing on the phase 1. Doesn't matter how good that is, he's still going to get it wrong. Otherwise, what's he going to do? Drive perfectly for 22 minutes?
Yeah.
We want our briefing on the subject to be concise, short and to the point. There are after big flowery conversations happen. Here's what you need to do, here's why you need to do it. All right with that? Yeah. Let's get on and do it then. You might be able to use his previous experience if you get cute. So, you know, for doing crossroads, you've done this before. What was it? Oh, it was MSMPS. All right, okay, so how does that apply here? Well, I'm not sure. Well, it's the same. So you use your MSMPS or the same. So if this is you back here, what are you going to do first? We'll check your room. Brilliant, well done. Then what? Then what? Then what? Then what? And then you get to the point where he hasn't got the experience. What would you do next? I'm not sure. Okay, well, what you would do is Because with a real life learner, you say, what do you think? You say, well, I'll probably do that. He's not going to play that game because he's helping you then. He's not testing your instructional ability if he's helping you along the way. So he's testing your knowledge.
But you can ask.
Of course you can, and it's probably policy to do that.
Yeah.
Now, the one that people get bent out of shape about, oh, I hope I don't get this one, I hope I don't get that one. It doesn't matter what you get. You know, number 10, PST 10, people don't like that one. Because on phase 1, it's partly trained. Meet, cross, overtake other traffic, allow adequate clearance for other road users or anticipation. They'll select a selection of those. And then on the second one, it's progress hesitancy, normal position. Oh, that's really awkward. No, it's not. Watch what he's doing and correct the faults you see. It's as simple as that. On the first bit, when you get up to this bit, he's partly trained, so you should have a reasonable level of, so tell me what you think you would do there. Well, I'll probably do that. Okay, what about this? What about this? I'm not sure. Tell him. Well, he'd probably do this then. So, don't get ourselves too bogged down into thinking we've got to have the most perfect brief in the world, because at this stage, people generally beat themselves up over this and spend hour after hour after hour practicing the briefing. That's a smaller part of it, isn't it? If that's a half an hour session and the brief's 8 minutes, it's the other 22 minutes that matter the most.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So that's where you get your eight minutes for your brief, do you?
Ish. 8 minutes, 10 minutes maximum.
Right.
Now, the one that changes on that, on phase 2, is parallel park, where you might have to do a brief, you might not. Again, we need to be listening carefully, because you'll say something like, I've got my test coming up in a couple of weeks, and we just discovered, we realised that I've not done my reverse park. Sorry, Kevin.
Was it PST 6?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find my way around it. That's it.
Thank you for it.
Not familiar with this yet. 93.
83.
Thank you very much. There we go. So this time there's a briefing box on it. So you will need to have a discussion with him at some point. But if you ever think about it, it's the last thing he's going to do. He's a trained pupil. He should have a reasonable idea. So how do you think we're going to do this? It's coordination controls. Tell me about that. What do you know about that? I'm not quite sure. Well, how did you control the speed of the car when you're reversing? You turn that on. I use my clutch control. Okay. And if that wasn't enough, what did you do? Or sometimes it was a car, I use my brake. Brilliant. Same here. What observations did you take on your other manoeuvres? Well, I was checking all around. What were you checking for? Well, what were the road users? And if they were there, what did you do? Well, I worked out what they were going to do. Brilliant. Well done. And accuracy. How accurate do you think we need to be here? What are we looking for? Well, I'm not right sure because it's a different manoeuvre. Well, we want to be within 2 car lengths. We want to be reasonably close to the curb. So tell me how you think we might do that. I'm not right sure. Well, what you'll do is, one turn to the left, we'll come round to this end. So it's fairly straightforward. You don't want to overcomplicate it, and it's traditional for people to get themselves absolutely and utterly bent out of shape with this at this point. And go, I can't do it. And then, you know, if you no matter how hard you try, if you want to try and get in every detail of a pedestrian crossing, you're never going to do that in 8 minutes. You're just not. So just the basics, get it in practice. And then he'll do stuff like, you know, these pedestrian islands in the middle of it, just like refuges. They're not really pedestrian crossings, but they're sort of part of it. You'd say, so that's a pedestrian crossing. Actually, no, that's a pedestrian refuge. But what would you do if there was somebody there wanting to cross? Should I stop? No. Or you'd say, oh, I'd be careful in case we're going to go. Brilliant, well done. Should I stop? No. So you've got to spot this and be listening. No. Well, it will depend. If there's nobody behind it, it was safe and it wasn't going to cost you anything, you might think about it, but you've got to be aware of what else is around. But what if the pedestrian stepped down? What would you do then? Oh, then I'd have to stop. That's it. Well done. Brilliant. So he will ask you questions that will test your knowledge on the move. He feels that you've given him enough of the basics. But I mean, pedestrian crossings, as you know, there's zebra crossings, pelican crossings, puffin, toucan, equestrian crossings, or Pegasus as they call them. Single lane one, dual carriageway ones. There's millions of them. So you haven't got time to talk about all of them. So just talk about the basics, light control and zebra. Get out and get it done. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I was to say to you, you know, what do you have an idea about what you want to do on the first time you go out actually in the car in anger?
What's that?
You don't have to have an idea now.
Well, start from the beginning, as if it is somebody hasn't been before, go through the cockpit, check, and setting off.
Okay.
Because that, to a certain degree, that is the absolute bread and butter, isn't it? You've got to understand how to make the car go and stop before you do any of it.
Yeah, because I think you can tie in the manoeuvre type
You can.
or the driving.
Bear in mind though, once I drop in the role, I'm ready to do whatever subject it is.
Yeah.
So you don't have to think, oh, this guy, I don't know if this guy can move off and stop. If I do it, I can move off and stop. So you'll assume that that lesson was done properly, I can manage it. So you can't drop in at any point. Yes, so I can see what you're saying, that it makes logical sense that way, and that's fine if that's the way you want to do it, but I'm not a learner learning through, and oh, can't do that until we've done this, because I'll be...
I think what Andy's saying is he wants to practice presenting cockpit drills.
Sure.
Getting into
It's a-
cars.
well,
This assumption,
It was,
It was an assumption, but I think I'm right.
Love it.
Don't say no.
Love it. Don't spoil us for me. No, that's fine. It's absolutely fine.
because if nothing else, yeah, and that's it's a valid point. That's what I've gone into the role of dealing with absolute learning. But I think if nothing else, that's the main building block. Get comfortable with that, and then we can look at all the other bits. So say, right, today I'm going to be at this level.
Only needs
Show
to
me
make
better.
sense to you. That's the key thing. Now, we're not together for the first bit. I'll put my diary here. My phone's on charge too.
Would you want
Have you got a
dates?
menu of the dates that we were in?
Yeah.
Or the dates that I've penciled in anyway, which we can then look at, because you're not available is next week and the week after, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we've got one scheduled the week after that, haven't we? Scheduled?
We've got today, 11th of May, 2 o'clock,
2.
12th at 2,
Yeah.
18th and 19th, 10 till 5,
Yeah.
and the 1st and 2nd of June, same timings, 10 till 5.
So, 1st and 2nd of June, wasn't it? So you're okay for those ones, aren't you? The 1st and 2nd of June,
They'll be fine.
but it's the next two.
It's
Yeah,
the 18th,
once-
19th is not.
Okay, that's fine.
Are you available for the 12th, Andy?
No, anything next week and the week after.
Oh yeah, you're not available.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm saying hopefully week commencing
12th,
23rd.
18th, 19th, so that's 3.
Get into
Well, not to be too sort of rude about it, because we've got the camera on it. This is builders you're dealing with, they may not turn up.
well,
If
yeah,
that's the
it's-
case and you're able to come, just
Yes.
come along at the same time. But failing that, we'll assume that I'll see you on the 1st and the 2nd.
Yeah.
And you'll be yourself next.
Yeah.
Is that Tuesday,
Fast-
Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday? Wednesday, Thursday, isn't it?
Fast and furious.
Yes, it is.
Get into it and get on with it.
Yeah. Now, I'm not opposed to booking tests at this point and go on head down and backside up. We can always move the test.
I'd like to get on with it and get going because the agencies I'm registered with are not providing work.
Right.
So I need to be getting
Okay.
earning.
Well, let's use the time that you're not at work
Yeah.
to good effect.
Okay.
So if you want to book a test, I'm okay with that.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
I'm on holiday June the 29th to the 6th.
So am I.
Right.
We're in Flanders, Somme, on the Somme. and that.
And I'm away again 29th of July. Sorry, I've just said that. 29th of June to the 6th of July. I'm back a couple of days, then I'm off again for a week. July the 10th to the 17th, I think it is.
If I look at dates for around about 6 weeks or so, what will that take us?
That's going to take us in where we're in the beginning. That's going to take us into July, isn't it?
No, it shouldn't do. It's only the beginning of May.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. It's going to be in the middle of June time.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. See if we can get a date.
Yeah.
If you want to look at perhaps doing, I'm going on the 29th, so if you wanted to see if you could slot one in, because if we're not ready, we're all moving.
That's exactly.
Maybe the beginning of that week, which would be the sort of 26th, 27th, something like that. And we'll see if then we'll sit down and say, right, we've got this to do, let's get these in. I'm thinking, based on what I've seen from you guys already in part 2, we're gonna rip through it fairly quickly, which is good. And again, if you think about it, the stuff that we did at the back end of part 2, you really need. You were ready for me. Nothing changed in the last 3 hours or so, did it really?
No,
Fairness. You were ready. We just, as the training was allocated, we just did it. But you could have quite easily gone without it.
And you might have incurred a fault if you'd have done that.
Yes, you might not have had a clean sheet then.
Yeah.
But we're not going to mention that anymore,
Sorry, mate.
ever.
What?
So look at what for me then, which week?
If we look at, I'll go away on holiday on the 29th. So
That's what, June.
that Monday or Tuesday would work.
So I
Right here,
start,
there.
so potential I'm starting there, week commencing
Yep.
23rd,
Oh, that's right, starting here. Oh, well, maybe that's a bit quick.
because that's first one we've got allocated is 1st of June, isn't it, with
Yeah.
yourself? So, well,
It was just 3 and a little bit weeks.
once I go for one in early July,
The only problem is I'm not here. I'm back on the 6th, but I go away again on the 11th.
For a week or
Just a week.
Just a week.
So if we could possibly slot one in. Well, it's 1st of June, not 1st of July, yeah, so possibly here, the 27th or 28th of June.
right, so,
Do we've got the use of the car for the tests, yeah?
Yeah. What day is it? Yeah. 29th Wednesday, they do part 3s on Wednesday, it's bloody, 29th I go away. So roughly the Wednesday before. Which is induction, but that's all right, it's the Wednesday. And that's induction there, so like the 22nd of June. So it gives you 3 weeks. If you're comfy with that, that's fine, if not, we'll move it further back. Well, wait and see after you've done that one.
But like you say, you can.
I think maybe wait till I've done that
Yeah.
one,
Okay,
just see how it's,
it's fine. I'm happy to work with you guys whichever way. Because you're going to get a head start, and if you want to book a test, do it.
I don't want to go.
It's interesting just to do this, because I've not done this before at this stage, which is what I planned on doing this last time.
Well, it gives us a deadline, doesn't it? So it forces us
Yeah.
to make the training happen.
I believe that at this point in time, you have everything you need. I don't think there's anything new to learn.
Right.
I think what we need to be doing is to look at ways of utilising your experience and your knowledge to good effect in this framework, which is the test.
Yeah.
There's nothing new for you to learn. You know all about it. You know how to do everything. You know.
So you can meet up.
Kind of cunt.
in between times, either in the evening or weekend,
Yeah, of course.
and go through what have you picked up so far,
Yeah.
and then hopefully, if that's,
Well, there's also the
as you say, can maybe drop on one it's towards the end of June.
there might be options as well. I mean, if you set these boys off working in the morning, you might be able to sneak away for a couple of hours.
I've got to be in the house, and there's only going to
That's
be,
fine.
that's
That's
only
fine. No
trouble,
problem. No problem.
it's the only downside.
Not a problem at all. We'll work with what we've got. That's
Our,
fine.
our builders built an extension mate on their own without us being in.
Yeah, bro, mine,
Oh,
inside and out, anyway, it's,
yes, that's fine. We'll
Yeah.
we'll work with whatever we have. If you're not on a